The Final Diagnosis, author Hailey. Page 328. "Oh, Dr. Coleman, do come in." Kent O'Donnell got up courteously from his office desk as the young pathologist entered the room. David Coleman had been cleaning up after the dissection when the message from the chief of surgery had reached him. "Sit down, won't you?" O'Donnell held out an engraved gold case. "Cigarette?" "Thank you." Coleman took a cigarette and accepted the light O'Donnell offered. He leaned back, relaxed, in one of the leather armchairs. An instinct told him that what was to follow would be a turning point in his life. O'Donnell moved behind the desk to the office window. He stood with his back to it, the morning sun behind him. "I imagine you've heard," he said, "that Dr. Pearson has resigned." "Yes, I'd heard," Coleman answered quietly. Then to his own surprise he heard himself saying, "You know, of course, these past few days he hasn't spared himself. He's been here day and night." "Yes, I know." O'Donnell regarded the glowing tip of his cigarette. "But it doesn't change anything. You realize that?" Coleman knew that the chief of surgery was right. "No," he said, "I don't suppose it does." "Joe has expressed a wish to leave at once," O'Donnell continued. "It means there will be an immediate vacancy here for a director of pathology. Shall you accept?" For a second David Coleman hesitated. This was the thing he had coveted, a department of his own. Freedom to reorganize, to mobilize the new aids of science, to practice good medicine, and to make pathology count as he knew it truly could. This was the cup he had sought. Kent O'Donnell had lifted it to his lips. Then fear struck him. Suddenly he was appalled at the awesome responsibility he would have to hold. It occurred to him there would be no one senior to relieve him of decision. The ultimate choice, the final diagnosis, would be his alone. Could he face it? Was he yet ready? He was still young. If he chose, he could continue as a second in command for several years more. After that, there would be other openings, plenty of time to move ahead. Then he knew that there was no escaping, that this moment had been moving towards him since his own first arrival at Three Counties Hospital. "Yes," he said, "if it's offered to me, I shall accept." "I can tell you that it will be offered," O'Donnell smiled. He asked, "Would you tell me something?" "If I can." The chief of surgery paused. In his mind he was choosing the right phrases for the question he wanted to put. He sensed that what was to be said next would be important to them both. Finally he asked, "Will you tell me what your attitude is to medicine and to this hospital?" "It's hard to put into words," Coleman said. "Will you try?" David Coleman considered. It was true there were things he believed, but even to himself he had seldom expressed them. Now perhaps was a time for definition. "I suppose the real thing," he said slowly, "is that all of us, physicians, the hospital, medical technology, exist only for one thing, for patients, for healing of the sick. I believe we forget this sometimes. I think we become absorbed in medicine, science, better hospitals, and we forget that all these things have only one reason for existence. People. People who need us, who come to medicine for help. He stopped. I've put it clumsily. No, O'Donnell said. You've put it very well. He had a sense of triumph and of hope. Instinct had not misled him. He had chosen well. He foresaw that the two of them, as chief of surgery and director of pathology, would be good together. They would go on and build, and with them 3 counties would progress. Not all that they wrote would be perfect. It never was. There would be flaws and failures, but at least their aims were the same, their feelings shared. They would have to remain close. Coleman was younger than himself, and there were areas in which O'Donnell's greater experience could be of help. In these past few weeks the chief of surgery himself had learned a good deal. He had learned that zeal could lead to complacency as surely as indifference, and that disaster could be reached by many routes. But from now on he would fight complacency and pathology with young Dr. Coleman at its head could be a stout right arm. A thought occurred to him. He asked, "One more thing. How do you feel about Job Pearson and the way he's living?" "I'm not sure," David Coleman said. "I've been wishing I knew." It's not such a bad thing to be unsure sometimes. It takes us away from rigid thinking. O'Donnell smiled. "There are some things I think you should know, though. I've been talking with some of the older men on staff. They've told me incidents, things I didn't know about." He paused. "Job Pearson has done a great deal for this hospital in 32 years. Things that are mostly forgotten now, or that people like you and me don't always get to hear about. He started the blood bank, you know. It's strange to think of it, but there was a lot of opposition at the time. Then he worked for the formation of a tissue committee. I'm told a good many staff men fought him bitterly on that. But he got the committee, and it did a lot to raise the standard of surgery here. Joe did some investigative work too, on the cause and incidence of thyroid cancer. Most of it's generally accepted now, but few people remember that it came from Job Pearson. "I didn't know," Coleman said. "Thank you for telling me." Well, these things get forgotten. Job brought a lot of new things into the lab, too. New tests, new equipment, and fortunately there came a time when he didn't do new things anymore. He let himself vegetate and get into a rut. It happens sometimes. Suddenly Coleman thought of his own father, his strong suspicion that the sensitized blood which killed the Alexander's child had stemmed from a transfusion his father had given years before, given without Rh typing, even though the dangers were already known to medicine. "Yes," he said, "I suppose it does." Both men had risen and moved to the door. As they went out, O'Donnell said softly, "It's a good thing for all of us to have compassion. You see, you never know whether someday you'll need it yourself." Lucy Granger said, "Kent, you look tired." It was early afternoon, and O'Donnell had paused in the main floor corridor unnoticed. She had stopped beside him. Dear Lucy, he thought, unchanged, warm, and tender. Was it really less than a week ago that he had considered leaving Burlington and marrying Denise? At the moment it all seemed far away, a nostalgic interlude. That now was nothing more. Here was where he belonged, in this place, for good or ill, was where his destiny lay. He took her arm. Lucy, he said, let's meet soon. There is a lot we have to talk about. All right, she smiled with affection. You may take me to dinner tomorrow. Side by side they moved on, down the hallway, and it was somehow reassuring to have her beside him. He glanced sideways at her profile, and there came to him a sense of certainty that for both of them there was much that was good ahead. Perhaps it would take time to adjust, but in the end he knew they would find their future together. Lucy was thinking, dreams do come true. Perhaps mine will, someday soon. Dusk came early to pathology. It was a price they paid for working in the hospital basement. Snapping lights on David, Coleman decided that one of his early projects would be to move the department to a better location. The day when pathologists were automatically relegated to the bowels of the hospital was over. Light and air were as much requisites for them as for any other branch of medicine. He entered the pathology office and found Pearson at his desk. The old man was emptying the contents of the drawers. He looked up as Coleman came in. Page 331.